This makes the Eagles absolutely unstoppable, as the Birds have just pulled out something from their bag of tricks that should have the NFL absolutely horrified for the next coming weeks of the season. Along with this, Jalen Hurts may have just found another target to favorite for big yards and getting points on the board. And we're going to get all of that and more in today's edition of Eagles Digest. How's it going, folks? I'm your host, Jack Kieley, and we're going to get into all that and more in today's video. Folks, this game was pretty reminiscent of the Rams matchup last week. It felt like I was just back in week 3 watching the same exact game. The offense couldn't get anything going after the second half, which is the opposite of what happened last week, as they couldn't get anything going in the first half and then came out swinging in the second half and ending up winning the game. But let's start with the offense. First of all, the passing was subpar at best. Jalen Hurts had 130 yards in the first half and ended up having nothing in the second half. 0 yards, nothing. This is pretty reminiscent of what Jalen Hurts has done through his tenure with the Eagles. Not being able to get a lot of yardage on the board, ending up leaving clean pockets, scrambling, using his legs. This narrative has followed him around. I mean, rightfully so, for pretty much his whole career with the Eagles. He's always had a problem finding open targets. Now, that could be him or it could be the play calling, and a bit of both, because if everyone remembers when they had Brian Johnson as the offensive coordinator, we all know how bad that was and how much of a mess it was. But, Jalen Hurts himself does need to be able to throw through those tight windows and target his players. But Jalen Hurts might have found a new favorite target in Dallas Goedert, who has had 3 touchdowns now through week 4 now. He had that big play last week against the Rams for about, I think it was a 40-yard gain. And then again yesterday, he found him for 2 touchdowns, again on 4 targets. This has been pretty brutal for the receivers, as you can see with A.J. Brown, who was targeted 9 times yesterday and only ended up catching 2 balls for 7 yards. Of course, we've seen this with A.J. Brown before. He, doesn't get the targets. He ends up being labeled a drama queen, and, this ends up being completely blown out of proportion, and he ends up, of course, becoming the all-pro caliber receiver that we all know. And as well, you can also see DeVonta Smith only had 2 targets as of yesterday, 2 receptions for 29 yards. He's always had trouble getting in the target game as well. Jalen Hurts, of course, is just going to, his first read, you would assume mostly is A.J. Brown. But as of late, it looks like Dallas Goedert has been the guy that Jalen Hurts is looking to. He's getting open. He's blowing coverages. He's got great hands to get the ball. And of course, Dallas Goedert is also a very effective run blocker. And speaking about the run blocking, that has been brutal as of late. Yesterday, Saquon Barkley could not find the running lanes. He could not get into the open field. And, that's just an attestment to the offensive line as well, who has not been up to par lately in the run blocking. They have not been as elite as they are known for. But obviously, the hope is that they can clean this up during practice, during the off days, and, obviously pretty much just drop some new schemes, see how they can play against the coming teams, and see how they can effectively block for Saquon Barkley. And of course, Lane Johnson being also leaving the game early again obviously does not help your case. But moving on, the Eagles pulled off a fake tush push, which is insane. We all know how unstoppable the tush push is. 92% of the time, Jalen Hurts squatting 600 pounds in college. We've heard it all before. We can't get enough of it. But I was watching that and I could not believe what I see. They could do that literally every single time they're on 4th and 1, 4th and inches. They could convert every 3rd down or 4th down if they wanted to. That play was unbelievable. Saquon Barkley was wide open. He ran walked right into the end zone. It was crazy. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This offensive line with Jalen Hurts' legs is absolutely, I don't have any words for it. Like, they are nuts with the quarterback sneak. It's completely revolutionized the play. It just baffles me how weird this offense is, because 1 second they look absolutely unstoppable, and then the other they cannot get anything going. As I mentioned before, 0 yards in the second half of the game. I believe they had, I think it was 18 total yards in the second half, and the Bucks, of course, made it look like that they were coming back, and that had my heart beating out of my chest. And of course, the defense, moving on from the offense, the defense, of course, did their best in the second half of the game, but of course, the Bucks could not stop getting constant yards on the offense. It was pretty brutal to see. Jahad Campbell allowed a touchdown. But he did save it with an interception that pretty much sealed the game. Overall, the defense did play pretty well, but of course, they did have their hiccups like any other defense does. We did have an injury, unfortunately, which, you don't want to see. Ogbo Okoronkwo did get injured, and, this defensive line is already depleted, as you can see from Nolan Smith Jr.'s injury, who is going to be out, I believe, for 4 weeks. But there is depth at this position, enough depth, I would say, to where we can still have an effective pass rush and run defense. Darius Smith did play very well yesterday, putting on about 3 pressures, which is really great to see. That was a great signing, again, by Howie Roseman. But, obviously you don't want to see someone like Ogbo, who did play in Cleveland and Houston and was a solid edge defender in his tenure there. But, obviously seeing them lose a player like that is tough, because, you want Nolan Smith back as soon as possible to put pressure back on your opponents week by week. So hopefully Ogbo can come back from a torn tricep. Of course, that is a brutal injury for a defensive lineman, and hopefully he gets a speedy recovery. Some other injuries that we do have from Jalen Carter. He apparently re-injured his shoulder in the game yesterday, which is obviously not what you want to see. Jalen Carter is arguably our best defensive player. Hopefully he can make it back for next week. That is someone you don't want to see off the field. You definitely want him on the field for as many snaps as possible. Another injury, not technically an injury, but he did leave the game early again, was Lane Johnson, as I did say before. But that is something that we need to look out for in the future, because Lane Johnson, if we don't have him, that is a big worry. Because if there is no Lane Johnson there, you think Jalen Hurts having 133 passing yards is bad? Well, if there's no Lane Johnson, he might have under 100 passing yards. Lane Johnson was there and he had 101 passing yards, but they did end up winning the game, which is what Jalen Hurts does. As much as the narrative is about him not being a good passer, he uses his legs, of course, to win games, but, when it comes down to it, he can make the big time throws and he can win you games. But that is going to do it for today's video, guys. Let us know your score prediction for next week. How many passing yards you think Jalen Hurts is going to have? Do you think it's going to be a nail-biter like these past 2 games? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks. Go Birds.